Today I'll be explaining absolute and comparative advantage. So the difference between the two is that absolute advantage is the ability to produce a good using fewer inputs than another producer. And comparative advantage is the ability to produce a good at a lower opportunity cost than another producer. Let's start with graphing the maximum. So if the US uses all of its resources to produce coffee, it can produce 40 units of coffee at a time. And if it does the same with blankets, it can produce 80 units of blankets. And that would just make a slope like that. And then for France, it can make 20 units of coffee if it uses all of its resources. And the same goes for blankets, and it can make 60. To find the absolute advantage, we can just look at the graph and the numbers itself, and we can see that the US produces more than France, so it has the absolute advantage in both coffee and in blankets. Now, to find the comparative advantage, we need to figure out the opportunity cost for each product. So in the US, to produce one coffee, we lose the chance to produce 2 blankets. And to produce 1 blanket, we lose the chance to produce half a coffee. Now, how I did this is that I knew that this was an output problem, so I kept in mind the rule OOO, or output other number above. So when we're figuring this coffee opportunity cost, so for 1 cup of coffee, we're going to have the other number, which is 80 over 40, and if we do that math, that's just going to be 2. So that's how we get this number. And we can just either flip it for this number, or if you want to do the math, you can do 40 over 80, which is 1/2. So let's find the same opportunity cost for France. So for 1 coffee, I'm going to put 60 over 20, keeping my rule over here in mind, and that math is going to end up being 3 blankets. So this is going to be my opportunity cost for producing 1 cup of coffee. I'm going to be losing the opportunity to produce 3 blankets. So now over here, we're just going to put 1 blanket equals 1/3 of a coffee, since we just flipped that, or you can put 20 over 60, which is again 1/3. So now we can finally find the comparative advantage. So let's start with coffee. And if we look at the US, again, for 1 coffee, they're going to be losing 2 blankets. But for France, if they produce 1 coffee, they're actually losing 3 blankets. So since France is going to be losing more, the US has the comparative advantage to France. Now for blankets, the US, to produce 1 blanket, is going to be losing 1/2 of a coffee. But for France, to produce 1 blanket, they're only losing 1/3, which means that France has the comparative advantage for blankets. So to find the best terms of trade for both countries, we need to look back to the opportunity cost. So the US wants to gain something, so they're going to be trading 2 coffees. And with France, we also want to be gaining blankets, so that's going to be trading 5 blankets. It's a win-win situation for both countries.